Today, I'll tell you the unbelievable story of Emily Hayes, a poor waitress whose act of kindness pulled her into the dangerous world of New York's most powerful man. The neon open sign of Eddie's Diner buzzed weakly against the humid summer night, casting a faint red glow onto the sidewalk of a quiet Brooklyn street. Emily Hayes stepped outside, grateful to breathe in the relatively fresher air beyond the diner's greasy warmth. She rolled her shoulders to ease the ache from a 10-hour shift spent balancing plates and forced smiles. At 24, Emily had already learned that in New York City, life rarely handed out favors. Her universe was an endless loop of pre-dawn alarms, double shifts, and the persistent worry of how to stretch each dollar to cover rent for her shoebox apartment. She paused under the flickering street lamp by the curb, tugging her thin cardigan tighter around her to ward off a slight midnight chill. Tonight had been particularly draining. The dinner rush spilled into midnight with a surge of lonely regulars and drunk bar hoppers. Now it was past 1 a.m., and the city's pulse had slowed to an eerie lull. Emily glanced at her phone. 1:37 a.m. Damn, the last bus to her neighborhood had come and gone, which meant walking the dozen blocks home. She took a deep breath and started down the street, the tap of her worn sneakers echoing softly between darkened storefronts. The city never truly slept, but this part of Brooklyn at this hour felt deserted and a little dangerous. Emily's route home took her through several quiet residential blocks and one stretch of shuttered warehouses. Normally she didn't mind. She had grown used to the solitude and had her keys wedged between her fingers just in case. But something about this night set her on edge, a prickle at the base of her neck, an instinct telling her to stay alert. As she passed a narrow side street near an old pharmacy, Emily heard a muffled thump, followed by a faint moan. She halted mid-step. The sound had come from the mouth of the dimly lit side street just a few paces back. Her first instinct was caution. At this hour, strange noises often meant trouble she couldn't afford. Yet as she peered into the gloom, she noticed a figure on the ground, slumped against a lamppost. Emily's heart kicked up its pace. Someone was lying on the sidewalk. For a moment, fear rooted her in place. New York had its share of passed-out drunks and homeless souls seeking rest, and intervening could invite unpredictability. But what if they were hurt? What if this person needed help? "Don't do it, Em," she warned herself silently, recalling every horror story her coworkers traded about Good Samaritans getting robbed or worse. Still, she found her feet already moving off the main sidewalk toward the fallen figure. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Emily called out softly. Her voice wavered in the dark hush. The figure, a woman she could now discern, gave no response. Drawing closer, Emily saw the woman was older, maybe in her 60s, with short silver hair styled in a neat, expensive-looking cut. She was dressed far too well for this neighborhood. An elegant navy suit jacket now smeared with grime from the pavement, matching slacks, and one low heel that had fallen off and lay a foot away. A leather clutch purse had spilled open beside her, its contents strewn about. A few credit cards, a tube of lipstick, some cash, and what looked like prescription pills in a small plastic case. Emily knelt, ignoring the grit of the sidewalk biting into her knee through her uniform pants. Up close, the woman's face under the lamplight looked ashen, her eyes closed. One of her arms was awkwardly tucked beneath her, as if she hadn't even had time to break her fall. Emily's gaze darted around. No one else in sight, no indication of what happened. Had she just collapsed? A heart attack or stroke? Or had someone attacked her? Hands trembling slightly, Emily gently touched the woman's shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" she enunciated clearly, trying again. The woman's eyelids fluttered faintly at the sound. A small swell of relief rose in Emily's chest. She was alive, at least. But conscious or not, the lady was in obvious distress. Emily quickly shrugged off her thin cardigan and draped it over the woman's torso, hoping to keep her warm in the night breeze. Without another thought, she dug into her own pocket for her phone to dial 911, then paused. Her eyes fell to the scattered belongings and something glinting among them. It was a heavy, cream-colored cardstock, clearly out of place among the normal wallet detritus. Curious, Emily picked it up. In simple, embossed lettering, the card bore a name and a phone number. No title, no company. Just the number, and above it, Matteo Caruso. Scrawled on the back in neat cursive were the words, "In case of emergency." Emily's mind raced. Matteo Caruso. Why did that name sound vaguely familiar? She worked at a diner where the cooks and waitresses gossiped about the city's goings-on. Names of local politicians and rumored mobsters occasionally floated in conversation during slow hours. Caruso. Wasn't there some story in the news a while back about a Caruso? A businessman? No, something darker lurking at the edges of memory. But she couldn't place it right now, and the woman on the ground took priority. Whoever Matteo Caruso was, he was clearly important enough to have an embossed emergency contact card. This woman could be a relative, maybe his mother. It was just a guess, but given her age and the fact she carried his card, it seemed plausible. If Matteo was the first person to contact in an emergency, calling him might be the fastest way to help her. The rational part of Emily's brain screamed to call an ambulance first. But then she remembered her location. They were in an industrial edge of the neighborhood, where emergency services notoriously took longer to respond. And if this lady had a heart condition or something, a few extra minutes could mean life or death. If Matteo Caruso could get here faster, or had private medical help, whoever he was, perhaps that was the very reason she carried this card. Hands shaking, Emily unlocked her phone. She hovered a moment between the keypad and the 911 dialer, then pressed the numbers from the card into the phone and hit call. The ringback tone had barely begun before a gruff, deep voice answered on the other end. "Who is this?" The male voice was tense and authoritative, each word crackling through the phone's tiny speaker with urgency and command. No polite greeting, just a demand. Emily swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. My name is Emily," she said quickly, pressing the phone to her ear as she glanced down at the woman. I found someone, an older woman, on the sidewalk. She's unconscious, I think it might be your mother. She had your card with her." For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the man's voice sharpened like a blade. "What happened? Where is she?" "She just collapsed. I don't know why," Emily stammered. "We're near Atlantic Avenue by the old pharmacy on 3rd. I work at Eddie's Diner and I was walking home." He cut her off, voice cold and precise. "Is she breathing?" Emily bent her head to the woman's chest. The rise and fall was faint, but it was there. Barely. It's very shallow. Her pulse is weak, too. She pressed 2 fingers to the side of the woman's neck as she'd seen in first aid guides, relieved to feel a thready beat. A harsh exhale on the other end. "Listen carefully," the man said, steel underlying each syllable. "Do not move. Stay with her. Don't call anyone else. And don't let anyone near her. I'm on my way. 10 minutes. "Oh, okay," Emily managed, but the line had already gone dead. She pulled the phone away, hand trembling. The abrupt silence felt as jarring as the voice had been. He hadn't even confirmed that the woman was his mother or identified himself, but something in his tone told Emily she had just spoken to Matteo Caruso himself. And whoever he was not going to ask twice. Emily slid her phone back into her pocket and blew out a shaky breath. Her heart was drumming anxiously in her chest. Was she doing the right thing? Should she have just called 911 instead? Perhaps Matteo would call an ambulance anyway. Surely he wouldn't just show up without medical help, would he? She cast a quick look around the street. It was deserted, silent except for the distant hum of traffic from a busier avenue and the buzz of the street lamp overhead. Kneeling there beside an unconscious stranger, Emily felt wholly exposed and absurdly alone, but at least help of some kind was coming. The woman suddenly gave a soft groan, a barely audible sound. Emily leaned closer. In the dim light, she could see beads of perspiration on the woman's pallid forehead. Was it a heart attack? She'd seen one once, a customer at the diner who clutched his chest and collapsed. He had been clammy and faint, not unlike this. If that was it, minutes mattered. Emily chewed her lip, indecision gnawing at her. 10 minutes, he had said. A part of her rebelled. What if he didn't make it in time? 10 minutes could be too long. But he'd ordered her not to call anyone else, implying perhaps that calling 911 might complicate things. It struck Emily as odd. Most people's first reaction would be, call an ambulance. Why would he insist she not involve anyone else? Fear of police? Hospital records? Emily brushed those thoughts aside and focused on the here and now. She gingerly took the woman's hand. It was ice cold. With her other hand, Emily adjusted her cardigan to better cover the woman's torso and arms. It's okay. Help is coming, she murmured softly, unsure if the woman could hear. Hang on, just hang on. She sat back on her heels, her jeans soaking up the dampness from the concrete. The city air felt heavier tonight, pressing down with a silence that was only broken by the distant wail of a siren somewhere far off. She glanced anxiously down 3rd Street, then back at the older woman. It occurred to Emily that she didn't even know this lady's name. She rifled gently through the contents spilled from the clutch, locating a slim wallet. Her fingers found a driver's license. She angled it toward the street lamp. Gianna Caruso, it read, next to a photo of the same woman in better health, smiling warmly. The surname confirmed it. This must be Matteo's mother, Gianna. Emily silently tried the name, hoping speaking it aloud might rouse her. Mrs. Caruso, Gianna? Can you hear me? She squeezed the woman's hand lightly, but there was no response beyond a faint, raspy breath. Time felt elastic, stretching and sagging with every second that ticked by. Emily's nervous mind filled the quiet with worries. If this was a heart attack or stroke, even 10 minutes might be too long without proper help. What if he doesn't get here in time? What if she dies right here in my arms? The thought made Emily's stomach clench. She looked again down the street. The far end of 3rd intersected a larger road, Atlantic, which at this hour was nearly empty. But as she watched, twin orbs of light appeared in the distance, coming from that direction. They grew brighter, accompanied by the low roar of a powerful engine. Then another set of headlights and another. 3 black vehicles turned onto her block, moving far faster than the usual city traffic. Emily pushed herself to her feet, standing protectively in front of Gianna's prone form. The vehicles, a trio of sleek black SUVs, raced down the narrow street, engines echoing off the brick facades. For a wild second, Emily had the urge to run. This is what you called, she reminded herself. They're here to help. Still, the sight was intimidating. Tinted windows, no license plates visible, and they weren't slowing down until the first one braked hard just yards from where she stood. Tires screeched against asphalt. The lead SUV's headlights washed over Emily, momentarily dazzling her. Doors flew open in near unison across all 3 vehicles. Shapes emerged, dark figures in suits, moving with astonishing coordination. In the glow of the street lamp, Emily counted at least 8 or 9 men fanning out quickly, some scanning the shadows, others converging toward her and Gianna. Her heart slammed against her ribcage. This was not an ambulance crew or ordinary concerned family. The way they moved reminded her of Secret Service agents or a private security team, deliberate, efficient, and armed. Yes, now she could see the unmistakable bulge of holsters under jackets as a few of them passed through the lamplight. One man strode at the forefront, and even without seeing his face clearly, Emily knew instinctively who he must be. He moved with a singular purpose, the other men parting around him as he approached as if he commanded the very ground he walked on. "Emily?" he asked sharply as he neared, his gaze flicking over her before dropping to the woman on the ground. The way he said her name carried both recognition and impatience. She realized he must have come straight to her expecting the young woman who called. "That's me, I'm Emily," she said, voice a bit unsteady. She stepped back to give him room. She just collapsed. I was walking and found her like this." But Matteo Caruso was already on one knee beside his mother, barely hearing Emily's words. In the harsh white beam of a flashlight one of his men held, she finally saw him clearly. Matteo looked to be in his early 30s, tall and lean, dressed in a crisp charcoal suit despite the late hour. His dark brown hair was neatly trimmed, an elegant cut that matched the sharp angles of his clean-shaven jaw. But it was his eyes that struck Emily most. Intense and almost black in the low light, like twin voids consuming everything they focused on. Right now, they were fixed on Gianna with raw concern, tempered by tightly controlled fury. "Mom? Mama, I'm here," he said quietly, touching the back of his fingers to her pale cheek. It was a soft gesture at odds with the tension radiating from him. With his other hand, he checked her neck for a pulse, much as Emily had, then her wrist. The slightest release of breath told Emily he found one. Another man hurried forward carrying a metal briefcase. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with keen eyes and a slight stoop. Without a word, Matteo moved aside just enough for the older man to kneel opposite him at Gianna's side, snapping open the case to reveal medical equipment. A doctor he had to be. The doctor immediately slipped an oxygen mask over Gianna's mouth and nose, then affixed a small device to her fingertip that Emily recognized as a pulse oximeter. Meanwhile, Mateo's men had formed a loose perimeter, some looking outward, guarding, while two others stood a short distance behind their boss, awaiting orders. Emily hovered a step away, feeling utterly out of place now amid this flurry of professional crisis response. Her heart was hammering from adrenaline, and she realized she was clutching Gianna's wallet and scattered cards in her hand. Hastily, she crouched to gather the spilled items, the lipstick, the pill case, the fallen shoe, and tuck them back into the clutch. Her movements drew the attention of Mateo for the first time since he arrived. He looked up at Emily sharply, as if just remembering her presence. Under his sudden scrutiny, she froze, clutching the small purse in both hands. Those dark eyes now turned on her made her breath catch. There was such intensity in them, and something dangerous simmering beneath the surface calm of his expression. "You found her like this?" he asked. The question was simple, but carried an undertone that made clear he demanded absolute truth. "Yes," Emily answered quickly, meeting his gaze for a second before hers fell, intimidated. "I was walking home from work and I heard her fall. I ran over and she was already unconscious. I didn't see anyone else around or anything. Unusual." Mateo's eyes narrowed slightly, as if assessing her every micro-expression. Emily felt pinned in place by that gaze, the weight of suspicion and worry behind it practically tangible. For a moment, in the silence, the only sounds were the soft hiss of the portable oxygen and the murmur of the doctor checking Gianna's vitals. One of the other suited men stepped closer. He was broad-shouldered and stern, his hand resting conspicuously inside his jacket. "Boss, we should get Mrs. Caruso moved. We're too exposed out here," he said quietly to Mateo, though Emily caught the words. "We don't know if this was an accident or something else." Mateo's jaw tightened. "Soon," he replied, not taking his eyes off Emily. "Dr. Verratti, how is she?" The doctor, Verratti, did not look up from where he was wrapping a blood pressure cuff around Gianna's limp arm. "Pulse is thready, blood pressure's very low," he said calmly, but his face was grave. He reached into his case and drew out a preloaded syringe. With practiced ease, he injected something into Gianna's arm. "I'm giving her a bit of atropine to help with the bradycardia. Possibly an arrhythmia or a vasovagal episode. Could be many things. We'll only know with proper tests." Mateo nodded once, a controlled gesture. He then returned his attention to Emily, who stood shivering not from cold but nerves. "What's your name?" he asked, though she had given it once already. "Emily Hayes," she replied softly. Her throat felt dry. She realized the fear that had been simmering inside her was now coiling tight, because now that immediate help had arrived. Emily was acutely aware that she was surrounded by armed strangers in the dead of night, and the man in charge was staring at her like she was one of the unanswered questions of this situation. "Miss Hayes," he repeated, almost thoughtfully, as if committing it to memory. The intensity of his gaze didn't waver. "You just happened to be here when my mother collapsed on the street? At nearly 2 a.m? I work late. At the diner down the block," Emily said quickly, gesturing vaguely behind her. She could feel her pulse pounding at her temples. "I walk home this way most nights. I promise I was just in the right place at the right time. Or the wrong time, maybe," she added nervously. "But I couldn't just leave her there." Mateo rose slowly to his feet. Emily instinctively took half a step back as he did. Standing, he was even more imposing, easily over 6 feet, his broad shoulders cutting a formidable silhouette. He glanced down at his mother again, where Dr. Verratti and another assistant were securing her onto some kind of stretcher board, preparing to lift her. Gianna remained unconscious, the oxygen mask in place, her complexion still worryingly pale. When Mateo looked back at Emily, some of the raw worry in his expression had transmuted into an unreadable coolness. He studied her from head to toe. Emily suddenly became conscious of how she must appear. A young woman in a cheap diner uniform, a few smudges of someone else's blood or dirt on her knees from kneeling on the pavement, hair messy from the long shift. Not exactly someone who belonged in his world of midnight convoys and private doctors. "You called me using her phone?" he asked. Voice level, but still carrying that undercurrent that demanded honesty. Emily shook her head quickly and held out the cream-colored card. "She had this card in her purse with your name. I wasn't sure what to do. I was about to call 911, but then I found this, and I thought calling you might be faster." He took the card from her fingers, and as their hands briefly touched, Emily felt how cold her own were, and how warm his skin was by contrast. Matteo barely glanced at the card, slipping it into his jacket pocket. You saw the name and decided to call a stranger in the middle of the night. A number that could have been anyone, for all you knew, he said, a peculiar note in his voice. It wasn't quite a question. There was a trace of incredulity there, as if her choice made little sense to him. Emily flushed, not sure if she'd done something wrong. It said in case of emergency, she replied, trying to keep her voice from trembling. I thought it must be a family member or someone who could help. And you got here so fast. I mean, it felt like the right thing to do. For a heartbeat, Matteo just stared at her. Emily couldn't tell what he was thinking. His face had settled into a controlled mask. Then abruptly, he gave a curt nod. It was. Before Emily could fully process that, he gestured toward two of his men. Stefano, Michael, get my mother into the car, carefully. The two men holding the makeshift stretcher lifted Gianna smoothly. The doctor stayed by her side as they moved toward the nearest SUV. The group began loading her gently into the back of the vehicle, which Emily could now see was outfitted inside more like an ambulance than a normal car. There were medical supplies visible, even monitor screens flickering to life. Seeing that, Emily's breath left her in a sigh of relief. Whatever else these people were, they were prepared. Gianna was in good hands. She expected maybe to be dismissed then. Perhaps a polite thank you, and then she'd slink back into the shadows of her normal life. But Matteo Caruso did not immediately follow his mother. Instead, he remained there, looming just a step away, watching Emily with those piercing eyes. You've done something important tonight, he said quietly, almost too quietly for his deep voice. Emily sensed that this was as close to gratitude as this man might openly show in front of his subordinates. You likely saved her life, Miss Hayes. Emily exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I'm glad I was there, she said truthfully, her voice a whisper. Now that the adrenaline was ebbing, she felt a little lightheaded at the enormity of it. She had just saved someone's mother. This powerful man's mother, apparently. He stepped closer, and reflexively Emily stepped back until her shoulder blades nearly touched the brick wall behind her. He noticed, how could he not when she practically flinched, and something flickered in his gaze. No good deed goes unpunished, is that the saying? He murmured, almost more to himself than to her. Emily's brow furrowed. I'm sorry? Matteo's expression hardened once more, and he spoke in a low, firm tone. You will likely hear about this night again, Miss Hayes. People will want to know what you saw, who was here, perhaps even try to learn details about me or my family from you. He might as well have thrown a bucket of ice water over her. Emily suddenly realized the implication behind his words. This wasn't an ordinary situation. Most people didn't drive around with their own emergency medical convoy. The men calling him boss, the way they formed a protective ring, the weapons, and that name Caruso, it clicked at last in her memory. A snippet of a conversation between two late-night regulars at the diner. Something about the Caruso crew, or that Caruso guy who took over after Old Man Moretti. They had been talking about organized crime, the Mafia families of New York. Oh, God. Matteo Caruso wasn't just a concerned son. He was a Mafia boss, he had to be. The realization was like a physical impact. Emily's mouth went dry. She looked at him anew, fear creeping in at the edges of her mind. He continued, mistaking or correctly interpreting her stunned silence as listening. It's important for your own safety that you forget what you saw here. My mother collapsed, you called, we came. That's all. If anyone else approaches you about this, you don't know anything. You didn't even catch a name, understood? Emily found herself nodding automatically. Understood, she whispered. The word came out more meekly than she intended. He studied her face, then said more gently, I'm not accusing you of anything. In fact, I owe you a great debt. The gentleness in his tone was surprising, almost jarring. Matteo reached into his inside jacket pocket, and Emily stiffened, a spike of alarm flashing through her. But he only pulled out a sleek black wallet. From it, he withdrew a thick fold of bills. Emily's pride kicked in a beat ahead of her caution. She shook her head and held up her hands. I don't want your money. Matteo paused, one eyebrow slightly arched in surprise. People probably didn't refuse him often. He looked at the cash in his hand, then back at her. Consider it a thank you for... No, Emily interrupted, her voice stronger this time. She swallowed hard and added more politely, "Thank you, but that's not why I helped her. I'm glad she's going to be okay." He stared at her for a long moment, hand still extended with the money. Slowly, his fingers closed around the bills and he returned them to his wallet. Emily realized her heart was pounding all over again, but this time not from fear of the situation, rather from the audacity of refusing someone like him. She prayed she hadn't offended him irreparably. Mateo's expression was unreadable, but he gave a single nod. "Very well." He slid the wallet away, then reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a simple business card, similar to the one she had found but with more detail. This one was black with silver lettering, Mateo Caruso, Caruso Industries, followed by a phone number. "If you think of anything else about what happened, or if you need anything," he emphasized the word, "you call this number. Day or night, it reaches me directly." Hesitantly, Emily accepted the card. Her fingertips brushed his again as she did, and she felt the faint tremor in her own hand. Mateo noticed that too, and his mouth pressed into a thin line, as if something about her obvious fear or nerves displeased him. "Miss Hayes," he said, his tone shifting to something formally polite. "I have to take my mother now. Our doctor will ensure she gets the care she needs." He glanced over his shoulder. Gianna was secured into the SUV, and the doctor was already climbing in beside her. The other two vehicles remained idling, ready to escort. Mateo looked back to Emily. "Go home. It's late, and you've done more than enough tonight, and thank you." The gratitude in that last statement was genuine, softening his tone. For the first time, Emily saw a hint of the worry and relief behind his controlled exterior. In that moment, he wasn't a terrifying mafia figure, just a son who almost lost his mother. "You're welcome," she said quietly. Then she remembered herself and added, "Thank you for getting here so fast. I hope she'll be all right." He gave the barest hint of a weary smile. "So do I." Then, with a final lingering look, was it of caution? "Respect?" Mateo turned and strode to the SUV holding his mother. The other men began piling back into the vehicles with swift efficiency. The broad man who'd advised moving Gianna gave Emily a final once-over as he passed, a slight nod of acknowledgement, or perhaps warning, and then climbed into the driver's seat of the second SUV. In less than a minute, the convoy of black cars was pulling away, engines revving low as they made a swift U-turn back toward Atlantic Avenue. Emily stepped back instinctively as the last SUV passed her, its tires splashing through a small puddle and spraying her shins with cold water. She barely noticed. Just like that, the block was empty again, save for Emily and the faint red glow of the diner's sign at the corner. It was as though the night's events had been a fever dream. One moment she was alone with an unconscious stranger. The next, a small private army had descended and vanished, taking the woman and leaving Emily with nothing but adrenaline tremors, and Mateo Caruso's business card clutched in her hand. She realized her cardigan was still draped over Gianna, now gone with them. A shaky laugh escaped her lips at the absurdity of it all. That was her favorite, and only, black cardigan. But she supposed if that was the worst she'd lost tonight, she'd consider herself lucky. Luck. Was it luck that she had walked by at that exact moment? Or something else? Emily didn't know. But as she finally forced herself to move and continue the journey home, she felt the weight of Mateo Caruso's last warning settle on her. "Forget this night. For your own safety." She slipped his card into her pocket and hurried along the sidewalk, feeling suddenly exposed now that the adrenaline was ebbing. Every distant rustle or flicker of a shadow made her jump. The gravity of what had happened was sinking in. If Mateo Caruso was indeed who she suspected, then she had stepped briefly into a shadowy world that most people only hear about in whispers or read in sensational headlines. A world that did not tolerate loose ends or witnesses. By the time Emily reached her small apartment building, she was trembling with exhaustion. Each creak of the rusty stairs to her second-floor unit set her nerves on edge again, and she fumbled her keys twice before getting the door unlocked. Inside, the air was stuffy and quiet. She deadbolted the door behind her and leaned against it, eyes closed. Images flashed behind her eyelids. Gianna's pale face, Mateo's intense stare, the gun that one of the men had subtly pointed toward the darkness as they arrived, as if expecting an ambush. The moment she realized just who she had called for help, Emily pressed her hands to her face and let out a long, shaky breath. "Holy hell," she whispered to the emptiness of her one-room apartment. It smelled faintly of the fried onions she'd cooked last night, a mundane detail that somehow grounded her. Toeing off her shoes, Emily numbly went through the motions of getting ready for bed, shedding her soda-stained waitress uniform and pulling on an oversized t-shirt. The physical routine helped keep the swirling thoughts at bay, just enough for her to function. Before lying down, she carefully retrieved Mateo's card from her pocket. She hesitated only a moment, then slipped it between the pages of a paperback on her shelf. Part of her was tempted to throw it away, to remove any trace of him and this whole situation from her life. But another part of her, a curious, foolish part, she chastised herself, couldn't quite do it. Finally crawling into her narrow bed, Emily stared at the ceiling, which was illuminated by the sickly orange glow of a streetlight outside her window. Sleep did not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that street again, heard the echo of that commanding voice. "Don't call anyone else." She saw those men emerging from the dark, guns at the ready, and realized belatedly how easily things could have gone differently. If she had been someone else, someone looking to exploit the situation, or someone who had hurt Gianna, what would those men have done? Despite Mateo's cold precision, he had restrained his suspicion to words. But Emily had the distinct feeling that if he truly thought she was a threat, she might not be lying safely in her bed right now. That thought alone was enough to make her break out in a sweat. She kicked off her blanket and rolled onto her side, willing her racing heart to slow. "It's okay," she whispered to herself in the darkness. "They have no reason to hurt you. You helped them." And indeed, rationally, she believed that. She saved Gianna, and that earned at least some goodwill. Even so, Mateo's warning replayed in her head. People will want to know what you saw. What had he meant? Who? Police? Reporters? Or worse, rival criminals? The idea of becoming a target or person of interest to anyone in that world was terrifying. If a Mafia boss's mother had been in danger tonight, could it have been foul play? The protective, tactical way his crew arrived suggested this was more than a simple health scare. Emily's mind conjured up frightening scenarios. Maybe someone had tried to kidnap Gianna, or worse, to send a message to Mateo. If that was true, then Emily had accidentally inserted herself into a conflict far above her pay grade. She groaned softly and pressed a pillow over her face as if to block out her thoughts. None of this was anything she could solve or even confirm now. All she could do was heed his advice, try to act normal, and keep quiet. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with fear, and Emily drifted into a restless sleep just as dawn began to edge gray light around her curtains. 3 days passed with agonizing slowness, and for 3 days Emily uttered not a single word about that night to a soul. Not that she had many people to confide in. Her circle mostly consisted of colleagues from the diner, and a neighbor or two she exchanged nods with. She certainly wasn't going to waltz into work and announce, "Guess what happened to me? I saved a Mafia boss's mother and got a late-night visit from the mob." So she carried on as usual, or tried to. She went back to working double shifts, letting the clatter of dishes and the jingle of the diner's door distract her. But she was keenly aware of things she never paid much mind to before. A black sedan idling too long across the street. A pair of suited men who came in for coffee and stared at her a bit too intently, the way the cook turned up the old radio, mentioning something about a weird unsolved incident uptown. She held her breath, but it was about an unrelated burglary. By the 3rd day, Emily started to feel a bit less like jumping at her own shadow. Maybe, she told herself, nothing more would come of it. Maybe Mateo Caruso and his entire world would simply forget her, the way she was trying to forget them. His mother would recover. Life would go on. The bruise on her reality would fade. It was a sultry Friday afternoon when Emily's fragile sense of normalcy was upended once more. The lunch rush had just tapered off at Eddie's diner. Emily was refilling the ketchup bottles at the counter, half listening to her coworker Tina gossip about a regular, when the bell over the door chimed. Tina's eyes went wide, looking past Emily's shoulder out the front window. "Wow," she muttered, nudging Emily none too subtly. "That guy's definitely not from around here." Emily turned, following Tina's gaze. Parked directly outside the diner's front window was a gleaming black town car, the kind that screamed money. and stepping out of it was a man in a tailored navy suit, the midday sun catching on the watch at his wrist that probably cost more than her car, if she had a car. Her heart did a funny flip of recognition when she saw his face. It was Matteo. Gone was the shadowy midnight uncertainty. In broad daylight, he looked every bit the successful young businessman. Or mob boss. Sunglasses shielded his eyes, but she'd never forget that commanding posture, even as he closed the car door and adjusted his cufflinks. 2 other men got out from the front of the car. 1 driver, 1 passenger, clearly bodyguards by the way they scanned the street before trailing a few steps behind him. He was coming here, for her. "Emily, you know that guy?" Tina hissed in a half-whisper, already moving to wipe down a non-existent spill on the counter as an excuse to keep watching him. Emily's throat went dry. She hadn't expected him to come here. Maybe a phone call or a letter, but not walking into her workplace in broad daylight. It took her a beat to collect herself. I think he's a relative of the woman who... You remember I mentioned that old lady I helped the other night? The one who collapsed? It's her son. Tina's eyebrows climbed high on her forehead as she processed that. Her son? He looks like he stepped off Wall Street. And he's coming in asking for you, girl. What did you do? Rescue the Queen of England. Before Emily could respond, the diner door swung open, and the bell tinkled furiously, as if as alarmed as she felt. Matteo Caruso removed his sunglasses, revealing those intense dark eyes. They swept the diner's modest interior, bypassing the scattered customers until they landed on her. Their gazes met. Emily felt her pulse jump. She tried to read his expression. There was a slight relief in it, maybe, and purpose. He approached with a measured stride, his 2 silent guardians taking a seat at a booth near the entrance, clearly giving him space yet remaining alert. He stopped a polite distance from where she stood behind the counter. A faint smile touched his lips, an attempt at warmth, perhaps, though it didn't fully reach those probing eyes. "Miss Hayes," Matteo greeted, inclining his head. "I hope I'm not interrupting." His voice, though civil and softer than the sharp tone she remembered from their first encounter, still carried that naturally commanding timbre that turned a simple statement into something that demanded attention. Emily realized she had been gripping the ketchup bottle so hard her knuckles were white. She set it down, praying Tina or none of the customers could sense her jittery nerves. She summoned a small smile. "Mr. Caruso, hello? This is unexpected." Understatement of the century, but at least her voice didn't shake. Tina was hovering just a step away, curiosity practically radiating off her. Matteo's eyes flicked to the other waitress and then back to Emily, understanding her reluctance to speak freely. "Perhaps we could sit," he suggested, gesturing to an empty booth by the window. "I'd like to talk if you have a few minutes." Emily glanced toward the kitchen where her boss usually was, but he was nowhere in sight. Likely out back taking a smoke break. Tina gave her an encouraging little nod, or was it a shove, and muttered, "Go, I'll cover." Hard in her throat, Emily slid out from behind the counter and led Matteo to the booth. She was hyper-aware of everyone's eyes. Tina's, the cook peering through the service window, the older couple down the aisle who had gone silent over their pie as he passed. It wasn't often someone in a suit worth thousands darkened their door. She slid into the vinyl seat opposite him. He sat smoothly, unbuttoning his jacket in a fluid motion as he did. For a moment, neither spoke. Up close in the daylight, she noticed he looked slightly tired, faint shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't been sleeping well. "I apologize for coming to your workplace," Matteo said after a pause, his tone genuinely courteous. "But I needed to speak with you, and I didn't have a personal number to reach you. I thought it best to thank you in person, properly." Out of the corner of her eye, Emily could see Tina hovering in the periphery, pretending to clean, but clearly eavesdropping. She also saw one of Matteo's men at the door, arms folded, trying to look inconspicuous and failing. "It's okay," Emily replied quietly. "I'm just glad your mother is all right. She is all right, isn't she?" A small but real smile curved his lips at the mention of his mother. "Yes, thanks to you. She's stable and recovering now, resting at home." He hesitated, then added in a slightly softer voice, "She asked about you, you know." "About me?" Emily blinked in surprise. She remembers collapsing and a kind young woman with pretty red hair trying to help her. The faintest hint of a tease colored his words. and Emily felt her cheeks warm. My mother would like to meet you when she's well enough to thank you herself. In the meantime, he reached into his jacket again, and this time Emily managed not to flinch. He withdrew a long, thin black velvet box and placed it on the table between them. He slid it gently toward her. This is for you. Emily eyed the box, then looked back at him. Her stomach fluttered with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. What is it? A token of gratitude, Matteo said. Please open it. Aware that several sets of eyes in the diner were watching, Emily slowly lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in satin, was a delicate gold bracelet. It was clearly expensive, the fine links interspersed with tiny, sparkling stones that could very well be real diamonds. It caught the sunlight in a dazzle that made her heart skip. Oh, I can't accept this, Emily said instantly, even as the magpie part of her brain marveled at its simple beauty. She shut the box hastily, hands shaking, and pushed it back gently. It's too much. You don't have to. Matteo held up a hand, polite but firm. It's not money, Miss Hayes, it's a gift. In my family, we're old-fashioned about thank yous. My mother picked it out for you herself. There was a plea in his tone now, so subtle she almost missed it. He was giving her an excuse, a socially acceptable reason to take it that didn't injure her pride. His mother's choice. Emily bit her lip. Turning down a cash reward was one thing. Refusing a personal gift chosen by a grateful older woman felt entirely different, almost rude, and he had phrased it in a way that laid it on his mother's door, whether true or not. Please, Matteo urged quietly. It would put my mother's mind at ease to know you've accepted a gesture of thanks. She feels indebted to you deeply. Hesitating, Emily let her fingers rest on the velvet. She recalled the genuine gratitude in his voice that night, the fear in his eyes when he saw his mother in peril. Perhaps accepting this wouldn't be so bad. It didn't mean she expected anything else, and if it made them feel better, all right, she agreed softly. Please tell your mother I said thank you, and that I'm so happy she's recovering. She managed a tentative smile. And it's beautiful. It's really not necessary, but I appreciate it. Relief looked odd on a man like Matteo, but she saw it in the slight ease of his shoulders. I will tell her, he said warmly. Thank you. He sat back a little as if a formality had been settled. But he didn't move to leave, and Emily realized there was likely more to this visit. As if confirming her thought, Matteo glanced down at his folded hands on the table. For the first time since he entered the diner, he seemed almost unsure. Miss Hayes, Emily, he began, catching her gaze. There was a weight to the way he said her first name. It sent a small thrill through her, and she wasn't sure why. I also came to make sure you're doing all right. I know that night was traumatic and perhaps frightening after we left. I wanted to personally ensure that no one has bothered you about it. His tone hardened a fraction as he finished, the unspoken or else hanging in the air. Emily shook her head. No one's bothered me. I've been fine, just working and... She almost said, trying to forget, but thought better of it, not wanting to imply he and his family were a bad memory. And everything's been normal. He nodded, studying her face as if verifying her answer. She wasn't telling the full truth. She had been jumpy. Yes, but technically no one had bothered her. That's good to hear, Matteo said quietly. His eyes wandered for a moment, taking in the simple diner around them. I know I was rather curt with you that night. You must understand. I was worried about my mother, and also concerned about what led to her collapse. Emily's curiosity piqued at that. She leaned in slightly. Have you found out what it was? The doctor, did he say? A muscle in Matteo's jaw twitched. Not conclusively, no, but he suspects it may not have been a natural health episode. His voice dropped lower, and Emily had to focus to catch the words. We found traces of a certain medication in her system, something she doesn't take. It could have induced fainting and slowed her heart. Emily's eyes widened. Medication, you mean? Someone might have given it to her? Even though she had suspected as much, hearing him confirm it made her skin crawl. He pressed his lips together, a shadow crossing his face. It's a possibility, one we are taking very seriously. He paused, then added in a voice edged with anger. If someone tried to hurt my mother, I will find out who, and they will answer for it. The air between them felt charged suddenly, the menace behind his words palpable. Emily shivered involuntarily. Not at him exactly, but at the idea that yes, she had indeed stumbled into something dark. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. And because a part of her felt he might need to hear it, she added, "I hope you find out what happened. She seems like such a lovely woman. I can't imagine why anyone would want to harm her." Matteo looked at Emily, and his eyes gentled a fraction. "Thank you, Emily. She is a lovely woman. Too good for the world I operate in." The admission was tinged with regret. Hearing him acknowledge his world so openly surprised her. Emily glanced around. No one was close enough to hear that remark, but still, as if reading her mind, Matteo gave a faint, humorless smile. "Don't worry. I'm not about to give a seminar on my business here." Then that touch of wryness softened into something more personal. "Would you perhaps let me take you to lunch? Somewhere nicer than this." He gestured politely at the worn Formica table and the ketchup-smudged menu tucked between the napkin dispenser and salt shaker. Emily was caught off guard by the invitation. Her immediate instinct was to refuse. Her life was finally calming down, and getting more entangled with this man spelled trouble, didn't it? And yet, there was a sincerity in his offer, and something in his posture that looked almost hopeful. The memory of their intense midnight encounter was still fresh. But here in daylight, with him showing politeness and even a hint of charm, she found her fear of him easing ever so slightly. She couldn't forget who he was, but she also recalled the vulnerability she glimpsed when he thought his mother might die. I'm still on shift," she said, half an excuse, half apology. "I already spoke with the owner, Mr. Kaczynski, is it?" Matteo replied. "He agreed to let you take a break. In fact, he seemed keen on it." Of course he was. Mr. Kaczynski practically melted when well-dressed rich folks came by. He probably assumed Matteo was some corporate big shot. Or worse, he somehow recognized him from the papers and was too afraid to refuse. Either way, her boss was obviously not going to be a barrier. Emily's heart fluttered. This felt like a crossroads. She could say no, take the bracelet and slip back into safe obscurity, chalk this up as a weird episode in her life. Or she could accept and see just a little further into Matteo Caruso's world. The thought thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. One look into Matteo's steady, waiting gaze, and Emily found herself saying, "Okay, I can take a lunch break." His smile was small but genuine this time. "Excellent." He stood, extending a hand in a gentlemanly gesture to help her from the booth. She hesitated only a fraction before placing her hand in his and rising. His grip was warm, secure, reminding her of how he steadied his mother's hand on the pavement that night. Tina shot her a look that was equal parts amazed and mischievous as Emily grabbed her purse and scribbled her clock out on the staff timesheet by the register. "I'll be back," Emily murmured to her friend, who just gave a silent, "You better tell me everything" waggle of her brows. Matteo escorted her out, one of his men swiftly moving ahead to open the diner door for them. On the sidewalk, the sun beamed down bright and hot, making Emily squint. The driver already had the back door of the town car open, the engine purring quietly. As Matteo guided her toward the car, Emily heard a whistle from somewhere across the street. Catcall or surprise, she wasn't sure, but she flushed nonetheless. She was keenly conscious of how it must appear. A waitress from a dumpy diner being ushered into a luxury car by a man like him. It felt like a scene from a movie. He must have sensed her sudden self-consciousness, because once they were both settled in the back seat and the door shut, he said kindly, "Relax. I know this is unusual for you. I just want to talk a bit more without prying ears, and make sure you get a decent meal as part of my thanks." As the car pulled away, gliding smoothly into traffic, Emily took a deep breath and nodded. The interior smelled of leather and a faint trace of his cologne, a clean, refined scent that made her head swim slightly in the enclosed space. "All right," she agreed softly, folding her hands tightly in her lap to still their trembling. "Let's talk." To Emily's surprise, Matteo did not take her to an extravagant 5-star restaurant. Instead, after a short drive, they arrived at a quiet Italian trattoria tucked away on a tree-lined street in a nicer part of Brooklyn. It was the kind of place one might easily overlook. A family-run gem with checkered tablecloths, and a chalkboard sign out front, advertising the day's specials in looping cursive. I hope you don't mind Italian, Matteo said as the car came to a stop. The owner is an old friend. It's closed to the public right now for a private event, but he owed me a favor and let me have a corner. There was a note of something in his voice. Pride, maybe, or apology for the secrecy. Italian sounds great, Emily assured, and it did. Her stomach chose that moment to rumble softly, reminding her she'd been too nervous to eat much during her shift. And the scents wafting through the open door of the restaurant as they approached, ripe tomatoes, basil, baking bread, were heavenly. Inside, the trattoria was dim and cool. A jovial older man in a crisp white shirt, presumably the owner, greeted Matteo effusively in Italian, clasping his hand and patting his shoulder in a familial way. They conversed briefly. Emily caught the man glancing her way with a kind smile and a word that sounded like Bella, which made her cheeks warm. Matteo introduced her simply as a friend, which also made her heart unexpectedly flutter. They were led to a small table near a window that looked out onto a tiny courtyard garden. True to his word, the main dining area was empty save for them, though Emily noticed two of Matteo's ever-present guardians had taken discreet seats at the opposite end of the room, giving the illusion of privacy while clearly keeping watch. Over fresh bread and olive oil, conversation came more easily than Emily expected. Matteo asked about her. How long had she worked at the diner? Was she from New York originally? Simple things. She found herself answering without hesitation. Yes. Born and raised in Queens. No, waitressing wasn't her life's ambition, but college hadn't been financially feasible after her mom passed away, so she'd started working, and 1 year bled into the next. He listened attentively with genuine interest, which both flattered and puzzled her. She doubted a man like him often paid mind to the mundane details of a life like hers. In turn, Emily cautiously asked him about his mother, sticking to safe topics. He spoke warmly of Gianna's charity work with local churches, how she still insisted on baking biscotti to send him at Christmas, as if he were a boy away at camp. There was clear love in his voice, and it made him a touch more human in her eyes. Main courses arrived, piping hot plates of pasta al pomodoro for her and a porcini risotto for him. It smelled divine and tasted even better. Emily realized it had been ages since she'd sat down to a meal she hadn't cooked herself or grabbed on the go. As she twirled spaghetti on her fork, Emily decided to brave a slightly deeper subject. Mr. Caruso, Matteo, he gently corrected. Please, after all that's happened, formality feels out of place, don't you think? She smiled a little. Matteo, she amended. It felt oddly intimate using his first name. But he was right. I was wondering, if it's not my place to ask, tell me, but why was your mother out there that night by herself? I mean, it seemed odd her being alone in that area. Matteo took a moment to answer, finishing a bite of risotto and dabbing his mouth with a napkin. She wasn't supposed to be alone, he said, frustration evident in his tone, even though she could tell he was trying to stay composed. She had a driver and a security escort earlier in the evening. She'd been at a friend's house for dinner. Stubbornly, she insisted they drop her off a block from home so she could walk and enjoy the air. It's something she's done often. She values her independence, and our neighborhood is usually safe, watched. He sighed, and that faint glimmer of anger flickered in his eyes again. It was my error. I didn't foresee that someone might attempt to approach her on her short walk. We believe someone intercepted her, maybe tried to talk to her, stress her into sending a message to me, or perhaps even drugged her quickly, as the doctor's findings suggested. We found her driver knocked out cold in his car around the corner. He'd been tasered. That's how we know it was a deliberate act. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. That's awful. It also aligned with the suspicion that had been growing in her mind. Yes, Matteo's voice was grim. They came after my family, after an innocent woman, to get to me. His fist clenched on the table, then he consciously relaxed it, noticing Emily's startled glance at the sudden show of anger. Forgive me. It still makes my blood boil. Emily reached out before thinking, her hand gently touching his forearm that rested on the tablecloth. I'm so sorry, she said softly. I can't imagine how horrible that must feel. His arm tensed under her fingers at first. Then he turned his hand over in silent acceptance of her comfort. It was a simple gesture, but somehow charged with meaning. It's the reality of my life, Matteo replied quietly. One I hope to shield her from. And others. They stayed like that a moment, his hand very warm beneath hers. Then he gently patted her hand and withdrew, perhaps mindful of propriety or the prying gaze of his men. Emily felt a strange disappointment at the loss of contact. Clearing his throat, Mateo changed the topic slightly. I hope you understand now why I was so insistent that night about discretion. Word of what happened to my mother got out in certain circles. If it became known that you were a witness or involved, those responsible might seek you out. His eyes darkened. I could not allow that. Emily shook her head, a chill passing over her despite the cozy restaurant. Have they tried to seek me out? He shook his head. Not that we've detected. I've had some people quietly keep an eye on you, just in case. Seeing her eyes widen, he added quickly, for your protection, Emily. The black sedan she spotted idling near her apartment yesterday morning suddenly made sense. She had chalked it up to paranoia. Maybe it wasn't paranoia after all. But at least they were his people, not the enemy's. Thank you, she said, not entirely comfortable with the idea of being watched, but admittedly relieved it wasn't malicious. Mateo's lips curved a little. I'm sure it was annoying. My apologies if it felt invasive, but I'd rather have you irritated than in danger. A small huff of laughter escaped her. When you put it like that, I guess I can't complain. They exchanged a gentle smile. The ease with which they were conversing now surprised Emily. She felt the initial wall of fear she had around him eroding. He was still the same man who had frightened her that first night. She could never forget the chilling authority in his voice. But he was also undeniably more than that. A devoted son. A man carrying heavy responsibilities who could show kindness and humor. The plates were cleared. The owner himself brought 2 cannoli and espressos on the house and winked at Emily when Mateo wasn't looking, as if to say good job. She couldn't help but blush. As she finished the last sweet, creamy bite, Emily realized she had nearly lost track of time. Lunch break at the diner certainly didn't usually stretch this long. I should probably get back to work soon, she said reluctantly, glancing at the clock above the wine bar. Over an hour had passed. Of course. Mateo signaled for the check, which was waved off by the owner with a playful scold that he wouldn't hear of it. He then stood and offered his hand once more to help her up from the table. But this time, when her palm met his, a sudden commotion from outside shattered the peaceful bubble of the afternoon. Raised voices echoed from the street, followed by a loud bang that made Emily jump, and Mateo's grip on her hand tightened protectively. One of his bodyguards was instantly at the door, peering out, while the second moved closer to shield Mateo and Emily where they stood. It's fine, the guard by the door called back, though his stance was tense. Just a car backfiring down the block. A couple of punks on bikes got startled, that's all. Emily realized her heart was hammering. Everyone in the restaurant had instinctively frozen at the noise. Mateo's men poised to react. The owner behind the bar crouched in alarm. It was as if they all half expected something terrible. Perhaps they did. Mateo's face had gone cold. His eyes narrowed toward the door. In that split second of perceived threat, she saw the other side of him surface. The boss. The man who deals in danger as a matter of course. His jaw was set, and there was a tension in him as if he was coiled to spring. Without thinking, Emily's free hand gently touched his forearm, drawing his attention down to her. It's okay, she said softly. False alarm, right? He looked at her, and some of the hardness melted. He nodded and released a slow breath she suspected he'd been holding. Yes, force of habit. They left the restaurant after warm goodbyes to the proprietor. Outside, the sunny street was indeed just as calm as before, save for a faint lingering scent of burnt exhaust. But Emily noticed Mateo's men were extra vigilant as they escorted her back into the car. The drive returning to the diner was short, but a heavy quiet had settled. Mateo appeared lost in thought, perhaps already reassembling his protective mental armor now that their pleasant lunch was over. Emily sneaked a few glances at him. His profile was sharp against the daylight, handsome in a severe way. This man who had shared a laugh with her over cannoli minutes ago now seemed distant, preoccupied. She wondered if he regretted spending this time, letting his guard down. Maybe he was thinking of all the work he had to do to track down whoever attacked his mother. Or maybe it was about her. Perhaps he felt guilty, bringing an innocent like her into his orbit even this little bit. Perhaps it was on impulse, but Emily decided to speak some of the thoughts swirling in her mind. "Matteo," she began softly, and he turned his head to meet her eyes. "Thank you for lunch. It was really nice, and I appreciate you making sure I was okay these past few days." "You have nothing to thank me for," he said quietly. "If anything, I'm trying to repay my debt to you. You don't owe me." "I do," he insisted, voice firm but not unkind. "You saved my mother. In my world, that creates a bond. A life for a life of sorts. You will always have my protection, whether you want it or not." His words should have frightened her a little. Talk of a bond and his protection. But the way he said it was almost gentle, as if it was simply a fact she needed to accept for her own good. Emily hesitated, then asked the question that had been nibbling at her since the night in the alley. "Why?" He frowned slightly. "Why what? Why did whoever it was go after her? Was it really just to get to you? I mean, who are these people?" She wasn't sure how far she could push, but to her surprise, he answered without rebuke. "A rival," Matteo said plainly. "An organization that wants territory, influence. The city isn't big enough for everyone to have a peace peacefully. They think I'm too soft, because I haven't engaged them openly. So they test boundaries, and sometimes they do horrible things like this to provoke a reaction or send a message." Matteo held out his arms in a gesture of surrender. "You have me where you want me. I came alone, as asked." "Pat him down," the bald man ordered his crew. The masked man approached Matteo cautiously, gun-trained, and roughly patted Matteo's waist and legs. He pulled a small pistol from Matteo's ankle holster with a grunt of satisfaction and tossed it aside. Emily's heart sank. Their precautions had been thorough. "Now," Matteo said, voice hard. "Let her go." The bald man shook his head. "This isn't a simple hostage swap, Mr. Caruso. Our boss wants a word with you." From behind a container stepped a fourth figure Emily hadn't seen arrive. A tall, thin man with silver hair and cruelly sharp features. He was dressed in a crisp suit, adjusting his cufflinks as if this were a business meeting. He looked to be in his late 50s, early 60s, but held himself with youthful arrogance. Matteo's eyes narrowed at the sight of him. "Victor!" he spat, confirming for Emily that this was Victor Kozlov, the rival who had orchestrated all this. Kozlov smiled a snake's smile. Matteo, you've been a hard man to get hold of. I was beginning to think you didn't value your lovely friend here." His lightly accented voice oozed false charm. Matteo took a step forward, fury emanating from him. "Let her go, Kozlov." "Your issue is with me," Victor tutted. "All in good time. First we talk business. You've encroached on my operations for the last time. After tonight, one way or another, the balance of power in this city shifts." Matteo held out his arms, chest heaving, in a gesture of resolve. "You have me. Kill me if that's what you want. But let her go, she's innocent." Emily's breath caught. Hearing him so readily offer himself, tears welled despite her efforts to stay brave. "No!" she cried, voice cracking. "Don't." The brute nearest her clamped a hand over her mouth, muffling her protest. Kozlov chuckled. "Touching. But this isn't about simply killing. If I wanted you dead, Caruso, I'd have done it already. Snipers are terribly efficient these days." He began to pace slowly, like a lecturer. "No, what I want is your complete capitulation. You will transfer control of certain assets to me. You will step down from your position in the commission and publicly endorse my interests. In short, you will make me the new king of New York's underworld. Then, maybe, I let you and your pretty friend sail off into the sunset. Live quiet lives, far away." Matteo's face was stony. "You know I can't do that. My men would never follow you. It would be an all-out war." Kozlov sighed dramatically. "Stubborn, just like your father was. Look what it got him. 6 feet under, and you scrambling to keep hold of half of what he built." Matteo flinched ever so slightly at the mention of his father. "Better to die on your feet than live on your knees." Victor's pleasant facade dropped, anger flaring. "Always the romantic. Did you know, dear Emily," he called over towards her, "that his father executed one of his own loyal capos just for talking peace with me? Bloodthirsty clan, the Carusos. Perhaps it's time that bloodline ended." Something in Matteo seemed to snap. Emily saw it in the sudden tautness of his posture. "Victor," he said dangerously. If you harm her, I swear to God." "You're in no position to threaten," Kozlov barked, pulling a gun of his own from inside his suit. He aimed it squarely at Mateo's chest. His men tensed, training their weapons as well, though they seemed to be waiting for some signal. This was spiraling towards violence fast. Emily's mind screamed for something, anything she could do. The brute's hand had left her mouth when Kozlov began talking, and now he stood a few feet away, attention fixed on the confrontation. She still had slack in the rope tying her to the post. She glanced down. At her feet lay the heavy metal cylinder of an old dock cleat, rusted through on one side, likely broken off from somewhere. Slowly, she crouched and worked her fingers around it. It was loosely attached to a short plank, but she felt it budge. If she could free it. She tugged harder, adrenaline lending silent strength. It gave way, a chunk of wood and metal, rough and weighty, now in her hands. Emily's heart thundered. The brute guard was closest, maybe 4 feet from her, side-turned as he watched the standoff. The others were further, focused on Mateo. She had one shot. Summoning every ounce of courage, Emily lunged within the tiny radius the rope allowed and swung the heavy cleat fragment directly at the brute's head. It connected with a sickening thunk. He crumpled to the ground without a sound. For an instant, time froze. Then chaos exploded. The masked man shouted, "Hey!" and turned his gun toward Emily, eyes wide at the unexpected resistance. Mateo seized that moment. From somewhere on his other ankle or waist, he flicked out a small blade. He must have had another hidden weapon. With a swift motion, he slashed upward, catching the distracted masked man's gun arm. The man yelled, the firearm clattering to the concrete as he clutched his gashed arm. Simultaneously, Mateo pivoted and drove an elbow into the bald man's throat as he swung his pistol toward him. The older man choked, staggering. A gunshot rang out. Everyone froze for half a heartbeat. Kozlov had fired, but in the confusion his shot went wide, pinging off a metal crate. Mateo didn't hesitate. He lunged for cover behind a nearby forklift, disappearing from Victor's line of sight. "Get him!" Kozlov screamed, backing up and firing twice more in that direction. The bald man recovered enough to scramble toward another stack of pallets for cover, pulling a second gun from his ankle, while the masked thug hastily stooped for his dropped weapon with his good hand. Amid the sudden firefight, Emily struggled to untie the rope binding her to the post. Her fingers fumbled at the knots uselessly. She felt oddly detached, shock threatening to take hold, but she forced herself to focus. She had to get free. Bullets whizzed, sparks flying as one ricocheted off the metal post inches from her. She yelped, curling instinctively. She saw Mateo pop out from cover and fire the masked man's own pistol, now evidently in his possession, at Kozlov, forcing the older man to duck behind a barrel. The bald man aimed and unloaded 2 shots at Mateo's position. Mateo darted to another stack of drums, using the shadows and clutter of the pier to his advantage. It was a full-on gunfight now, and aside from Mateo's acquired handgun, it was 3 against 1. The brute she knocked out was still motionless. 1 down at least. Emily knew if she didn't get out of the way, she was as good as collateral damage. Gritting her teeth, she started rubbing her rope bindings against the sharp edge of the broken cleat piece still in her hand. Perhaps the rusted metal could fray the rope. Above the din of gunfire, sirens suddenly wailed in the distance. Police? The harbor patrol? Perhaps someone in the area reported the shots. Kozlov cursed loudly. "Wrap it up now!" The masked man, bleeding from his arm, gripped his pistol and began advancing toward where Mateo had last fired from, while the bald man provided cover fire. Mateo returned fire, hitting the masked thug in the leg. The man howled and went down on one knee. In that moment, Kozlov broke from cover and ran straight at Emily. Before she could react, he grabbed her, yanking her upright by the rope and pressing his gun to her temple. She gasped at the sudden vice-like grip and the cold metal against her skin. Mateo emerged from behind a stack of pallets just in time to see it. He froze, gun raised but unable to get a clear shot at Victor without hitting Emily. His eyes met hers across the distance, fierce, desperate. Victor panted, using Emily as a shield between him and Mateo. "Drop it," he snarled, "or I swear I will put a bullet in her brain." Emily squeezed her eyes shut, tears spilling. This was it. "Don't!" Mateo yelled, taking a step forward. "Drop the gun, Caruso," Kozlov barked, digging the barrel harder against Emily's temple. She whimpered involuntarily, For a terrifying couple of seconds, no one moved. Then slowly, Matteo knelt and set the pistol on the ground, sliding it away. He raised his hands, chest heaving. "Let her go, and I'll do whatever you want," he said, voice raw with emotion. "I'll give you the empire, disappear, anything, just please." Victor sneered triumphantly and started to back toward the nearest car, an old sedan, presumably theirs, dragging Emily with him. "If I recall, that's more or less where we started. But too late, my boy. I think I'd prefer to send a message with both of your bodies." Emily opened her eyes in time to see a blur of motion behind the pile of crates beyond Victor. Was that? A thunderous crack resounded. For a split second, Emily thought she'd been shot. But she felt no pain. Instead, she saw Viktor Kozlov's face go slack with shock, his eyes dropping to a sudden red stain blooming on his pristine white shirt. Another shot rang out, and she felt the rope jerk violently as Kozlov was thrown back. His grip on her loosened, the gun at her head clattering away. Victor collapsed to the pier, 2 red patches spreading on his torso. Emily stumbled free of his grasp, breathing hard. She looked toward the source of the gunshots. Out of the darkness strode a figure she recognized, one of Matteo's men, Stefano, the one who had been at the diner's door just yesterday. Behind him, a few others fanned out, weapons drawn. They must have followed despite orders, waiting for an opening. Relief crashed over her in a wave. The cavalry had arrived, and in the nick of time. The bald kidnapper and the masked one, seeing their boss down and reinforcements swarming, immediately threw down their guns and raised their arms in surrender. Matteo wasted no time sprinting toward Emily. She could barely stand as the adrenaline faded, legs buckling. But he caught her, strong arms wrapping around her trembling form just as her knees gave out. "Emily," he murmured, cradling her head against his chest. She clung to him, sobbing in earnest now, all the terror and relief pouring out. "It's okay, I've got you. You're safe now," he soothed, one hand stroking her hair, the other steadying them both as he lowered them to sit on the ground. She could feel his heart pounding almost as hard as her own. Behind them, Matteo's men disarmed the remaining kidnappers and checked Kozlov, who lay motionless, eyes staring vacantly at the night sky. Sirens grew louder. Flashing red and blue lights reflected off the side of a warehouse at the end of the pier. The police were almost there. One of Matteo's men said urgently, "Boss, we need to go now." Matteo held Emily a fraction tighter. "I'm not leaving her." The man hesitated. "They'll be here in seconds. If we stay, we'll have a lot to explain. And you'll be—" "I don't care," Matteo snapped. But Emily found her voice finally, albeit weak and muffled against his shirt. "He's right," she said. She pulled back enough to look Matteo in the eyes. "You have to go. The police, if they catch you here—" He cupped her face, worry etched in every line. "I won't leave you to deal with this alone. You're hurt." Only then did Emily realize she must look a fright. Blood smeared from her split lip, a bruise forming on her temple, wrists raw from rope. One of the other men approached, a phone pressed to his ear. "Boss, it's your mother. She heard something over the police scanner about gunfire at the docks. She's worried." Matteo's jaw clenched in frustration. Emily managed a tiny pained smile and placed a hand over his on her cheek. "Go," she urged softly. "I'll be okay. It's over." He closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. Leaning in, he pressed a gentle, lingering kiss to her forehead. "I will find you as soon as I can," he whispered fiercely. "I promise." With that, he stood, still holding her hand until the last second as he stepped away. Then he was gone, melting into the shadows with his men, just as the first NYPD squad cars screeched onto the pier, officers fanning out with guns raised, yelling for anyone present to put their hands up. Emily sat there amid the aftermath, bound, bruised, next to a dead crime boss and 2 wounded thugs moaning on the ground, and let the police find her. They swarmed in, shouting, securing weapons, cuffing the kidnappers. 2 officers gently untied her and helped her up. She answered their flurry of questions in a daze, sticking to a simple story. She was abducted, held hostage, not sure who these people were or why. Yes, that was Viktor Kozlov. The cops exchanged dark glances at that. No, she didn't know the man who saved her. Everything happened so fast and it was dark. Maybe a rival of Kozlov's? She didn't know. She kept insisting. playing the traumatized, clueless victim as best as she could. In truth, it wasn't entirely an act. She was traumatized and grateful and exhausted. And above all, she missed Mateo's presence fiercely, even though he'd only been gone minutes. An ambulance arrived. EMTs fussed over her, checking her head injury and wrapping her wrists. The world felt surreal. As they lifted her into the ambulance to take her for further evaluation, Emily caught a glimpse of a black sedan far down the street, barely visible behind a line of warehouses. It was there one second and gone the next. Maybe it was her imagination, but she liked to think it was him, watching just to ensure she was safe. In the days that followed, Emily became something of a reluctant media sensation. Hero waitress survives mob kidnapping. Her face was on the local news, though she kept her interviews brief and vague. The police kept her in protective custody at a hospital for 2 nights, mostly to guard against any retaliatory attempt and to question her repeatedly. But with Kozlov dead, and his surviving goons eager to cut deals, the case against that faction solidified quickly, without needing much from her. She gave formal statements, identified the kidnappers, and that was all. When the dust settled, it looked as if the Kozlov operation had been planning to go after the Caruso family, and she was collateral caught in the crossfire. The official narrative was that an unknown third party intervened in the firefight. Some speculated it was vigilante justice or a rival gang, but no one could say for sure. Emily, of course, kept Mateo's name out of it entirely, and without evidence, the authorities couldn't connect him to the scene. If any detectives suspected the truth, they didn't press her on it. Perhaps even they didn't want to tug that thread too hard. Eventually, she was allowed to go home. Her boss at the diner gave her paid time off, a first in the history of Eddie's Diner, to rest and recover. Her neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, insisted on bringing her soup and watching over her like a doting aunt whenever she could. But what Emily truly yearned for was a sign from Mateo. She had his number, of course, and he had hers. But after such a harrowing ordeal, she understood he might be laying low, or dealing with the power vacuum left by Kozlov's demise. The newspapers hinted that police presence in the city's underworld was heavy, anticipating potential fallout. So she waited, trying to be patient, trusting his promise. It was 5 days after the incident when a knock came at her apartment door just after sunset. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. Somehow she knew, even before peeking through the peephole. She opened the door to find Mateo standing there in a charcoal jacket, looking tired and a touch nervous. Behind him at the stairwell loitered one of his ever-watchful men. She recognized Stefano again, who politely turned away to give them privacy. For a moment, she and Mateo simply looked at each other. Then Emily broke into a smile that brought a sheen of tears to her eyes, and Mateo stepped forward, gently wrapping her in his arms. She sank against him, releasing a breath she felt she'd been holding ever since that night. "Hi," she managed, voice wobbling with happiness. "Hi," he whispered, pulling back just enough to search her face. His fingers lightly traced the fading bruise on her temple, then the healing cut on her lip, as if reassuring himself she was really okay. "I'm sorry it took me so long." "You're here now. That's all that matters," she said earnestly. Then with a half-chuckle, "Though you've caused quite a stir in my life, you know. Paparazzi I never asked for." His mouth twitched in a guilty smile. "I heard. You handled it brilliantly. I'm sorry you had to endure any of it." Emily shook her head. "We both endured, but we made it." Mateo's expression turned more serious. "It's over. Kozlov's men have scattered or come to heel under other leadership. The immediate danger is gone, and I've had a lot of time to consider what's next." She guided him into her apartment, shutting the door behind. He looked around the tiny studio, his tall frame almost out of place in the humble surroundings. But she saw no judgment, only relief and tenderness in his gaze when it returned to her. "Sit," she offered, motioning to her small couch. They settled side by side, turned toward each other. Dusk's light slanted through her window, casting long shadows. Mateo took a breath. "I meant what I said that night. I'll step away from it all. Leave the city, the business. If it means keeping you safe. Keeping us safe. My father's empire. I've realized it'll consume me otherwise. Or get those I love killed. I was ready to hand it over to that madman to save you, and I have no regrets." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. There are already others eager to fill any void. Let them fight over it. I want no part. Emily felt a warmth and admiration swelling in her chest. She knew what it meant for someone like him to walk away. Are you sure? She asked gently. It's a huge step. Your family, your allies. My mother supports it fully, he interjected. She wants nothing more than to see me out of harm's way and happy. When I told her about you, about wanting a different life, she nearly cried with joy. That made Emily smile. She had yet to properly meet Gianna, but from his stories she felt like she knew her a little. And what will this different life look like? She asked softly. Matteo smiled, a real hopeful smile she'd only seen hints of before. However we want it to. We could stay in New York, try to live quietly under the radar, or go somewhere far from here, start fresh. My legitimate business ventures provide enough wealth to live comfortably in any corner of the world. He paused, lifting her hand to his lips and brushing a kiss over her knuckles. But all of that is meaningless if it's not something you want too. I know I'm asking a lot. Your life was perfectly normal until I stumbled into it. I can't promise everything will be a fairy tale. There might be echoes of my past that follow. But I can promise you won't face them alone. I'll spend the rest of my days protecting and cherishing you if you'll let me. Emily felt tears again, but this time they were tears of happiness welling up. She gently cupped his cheek, feeling the slight rasp of stubble under her palm. Matteo, you are what I want. Through whatever comes. I chose that when I stepped into that car with you and didn't look back. He turned his head to press a kiss into her palm, eyes shining. You have changed my life, Emily Hayes, for the better. And you changed mine, she whispered. We'll figure out the rest together, okay? Together, he echoed, and closed the small gap between them to kiss her. It was their first true kiss, coming after chaos and fear, now a promise of love and freedom. His lips were soft and warm against hers, careful at first as if afraid to hurt her healing wound, but she melted into him, deepening it with all the emotion pent up in her heart. When they finally parted, breathless, Emily laughed quietly. You know, if someone told me a week ago I'd be kissing a Mafia prince in my apartment, I'd have said they were insane. Matteo chuckled, resting his forehead against hers. Fate has a strange sense of humor. She grew more serious and added, I don't need fancy or safe or anything specific. I just need you, whatever that looks like. He kissed her again softly. You have me, and I have you. That's all that matters. Outside, the city pulsed on as it always did. Cars honking, distant chatter of neighbors on stoops, life moving unabated. But inside that little apartment, a new world was being forged between two people who had found something precious in each other amid the darkness. Emily curled into Matteo's embrace on the couch, content to stay there as night fell. There were details to figure out. Yes. Where they'd go. How to transition out of his old life gracefully. But they had time and, most importantly, hope. At one point, Matteo's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it and smiled. It's my mother. She wants to invite you to dinner as soon as you're ready. Emily grinned. I suppose I should formally meet my rescuer's mother, shouldn't I? He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, his expression turning tender. She'll love you. She already does. Just hearing about you. I look forward to it. Emily settled against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart under her cheek. For a long moment, they sat in peaceful silence, simply holding on to each other. The nightmare was over, and dawn was coming. Perhaps not literally just yet, but in the trajectory of their lives. Emily thought of the girl she was only a short while ago, tired, scraping by, convinced that surprises in life were rarely good. How wrong she was. Meeting Matteo had been the most terrifying and extraordinary thing to ever happen to her. It upended everything, and yet she felt more alive and seen than ever before. She lifted her head to look into his eyes. So where to, Mr. Crusoe? What corner of the world shall we carve out for ourselves? He smiled, that boyish grin that made her stomach flutter. I hear Tuscany is lovely this time of year, he mused. Vineyards, quiet villages, or perhaps the coast of Spain, with warm breezes off the Mediterranean. Anywhere, as long as I'm with you. Emily closed her eyes, imagining it. Sun-drenched days, no threats looming, just them living freely, maybe even daring to be happy in the simplest of ways. It sounded perfect, but even if plans changed or troubles arose, she knew they would face them side by side. They had already passed through fire and come out forged stronger together. She met his gaze steadily, squeezing his hand. Anywhere sounds perfect. Mateo leaned in and kissed her once more, sealing their unspoken pact. And as Emily kissed him back, she felt it deep in her soul. Sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to exactly where you were meant to be. Her old life as a lonely waitress was gone, left in the ashes of that night. In its place was a future she never dared dream of. A future with a man who had risked everything for her, and who she would gladly follow to the ends of the earth. Whatever lay ahead, they would step into it together, hand in hand, hearts intertwined, ready to face a new dawn beyond the shadows of the past.